Welcome back to From the Bridge. I'm Rick Jones, and we have an incredibly special show today with the great Steve Robinson, who served as the Chief Marketing Officer at Chick-fil-A. Steve recently retired and wrote a book about his days at Chick-fil-A called Covert Cows and Chick-fil-A. He's going to share a lot of great stories about being part of a team that built one of the best companies in the world. But first, I want to set the stage by talking about culture. Every organization has a culture. I often laugh at our conversation about immigration here in America. I'd like to respectfully remind all of you that everyone in this country either is an immigrant or came from descendants who were immigrants. And that includes our Native Americans who walked across the Bering Sea at some point. That's right, none of us were from here. And all of the cultures they brought with them created our uniquely American culture. Now, you guys all know that I'm a big foodie. That's why I tell you someplace good to eat each week. One of the projects we're working on in both our American heritage and our food and tourism verticals here at FishBait is a concept we're calling United Taste of America. We want to organize a number of our great ethnic food festivals, many of which were actually started by descendants of immigrants or immigrants themselves. And we want to organize these festivals in order to attract foreign visitors to the United States, for them to come and see how we've interpreted their foods, like tamales or pierogies or blintzes, or how we've adapted and made things like gumbo or boudin, or the various ways we cook barbecue. I was at a lecture once on the origins of Southern foods that African slaves brought, like okra and peanuts, or foods from the Scotch-Irish, those were my people, like burgoo, or foods like chicken and dumplings. Someone asked the panel about chicken fried steak, and the panel was baffled and did not have any answer to where it came from. I then, from the audience, reminded everyone that chicken fried steak originated in Texas from German settlers. You see, chicken fried steak is simply Wiener Schnitzel with bad meat. What they did was they'd take the tough meat from a longhorn steer, they'd pound it into submission, they would batter it up in flour, fry it up in lard, and then put milk gravy all over it. And that way they could cover up the bad meat. The truth is, I love chicken fried steak even better than I love a grilled filet. So the foods of our country add to our culture, but so does our religions, our music, our traditions, and yes, our values, because I believe culture starts with values. At FishBait, we try to lead with our values. We run a family business. In fact, we do have several immediate family members actually on our team, but we treat all of our associates like family. I worked at a summer camp one year, and Jay Rhodes, who was a college basketball coach at Limestone College, had a great saying. He would say, "Hey, babe, anybody can go when they're well." Well, last year we were not well. We had little to no business after March. But if you say that you run a family business and that everyone that works with you is family, then you actually have to walk that talk. And what do? We did not let anybody go. We cut salaries. We took some PPP money. We took out an SBA loan. And yes, the leading shareholder, and that would be me, put in personal money from my retirement fund to make sure that we could take care of all of our people. See, we believe people are more important than profits, but we do believe in profits. And we have a plan to share the profits with all of our associates, but we also pay what we call our business tithe. We give 10% of our annual profit to charity. Our values say that capitalism without compassion Capitalism without giving back is really a sin. Our culture is based on feeding sheep. We feed our families first. We take care of our clients. We pay our vendors the same day the invoice arrives. We work pro bono for a number of charities, and we put our money where our mouth is. Well, why do we do this? Because our collective value system says all of these things are simply the right things to do. We're going to talk a lot about culture this season on From the Bridge because culture is the foundation for success, and we all strive to be successful. Let's jump back up on the old soapbox. Have you seen where beef has become the enemy of the people, or at least some people? Seems cows can cause some pollution, and they use a lot of grass, which uses a lot of water. Even the president has jumped on that bandwagon. I wonder if the folks that are against beef also want to get rid of the Chick-fil-A cows who actually tell you to eat more chicken. I told you earlier in this program that I like chicken fried steak a lot. I also like hamburgers. I like big juicy grill steaks, and I like flank steak tacos. We just added the National Cattlemen's Beef Association and their national campaign, Beef, It's What's for Dinner, as a new sponsor of our ESPN Events Tailgate Tour. We're going to be sampling beef kebabs at college football games throughout the season. It reminds me of an old ad they once did with the actor James Garner. Now, for those of a certain generation, you may remember James Garner first as Brett Maverick on the old TV show and later as Jim Rockford on the Rockford Files. In this commercial, James Garner said he did not like putting any vegetables on his beef kebabs, just meat, because he said that's why God invented salad. My sentiments exactly. Now, if you don't want to eat beef, I have no problems with that. I'll just leave more for me. My special guest, Steve Robinson, knows a lot about culture because he both worked in a virtuous culture and contributed to make it better than he found it. Let's welcome Steve to the bridge. Hey, Steve, thanks for being with us today.
Rick, it's an honor. Really is.
Covert Cows and Chick-fil-A, I'm going to tell you, it is a terrific book. It is so good in so many ways. What made you write it?
Well, I'd been out of Chick-fil-A about a year. I was still on their board, but the business was growing so rapidly, and it still is, that I was noticing an increasing number of staff and operators who really didn't understand the stories, if you will, the cultural roots of the business. And leadership was running around like cats with their tails on fire, and nobody had time to step back and seriously think about how do we document our history. So I asked Dan Cathy if he'd give me the rights to do it. He said, go for it. And so having 35 years in the organization, literally kind of growing up with the brand, I decided I want to write this book first and foremost for the Chick-fil-A family. And as it developed, and I shared drafts with other people, they encouraged me you need to publish it and make it available for the public too. So that's how it got started. And it was fun to write it because I had a lot of files and a lot of notes, but my Chick-fil-A experience was so memorable. I was able to do almost all of it from memory. And I don't know that I could do that now, but when I wrote it, I was. So it was a great experience to get it on paper, and I have so much respect for Truett and his family, and the opportunity they gave me. So I wrote it first and foremost for the business.
Well, you truly honored him and honored the family and honored the legacy in a way that I think no outsider could have ever done.
Yes.
I've seen a lot of books where somebody comes in and they aggregate, they interview, they do stuff, and they can weave a story, but
not the same.
It's not the same. The fact that you had been there through just the entire evolution, and I think was what made the book so strong. But you mentioned Truett, but you also talk a lot in the book about mentors in your life, and it started with your father.
Yes, it did.
So talk about some key learnings from him.
Well, my dad was raised on a hybrid seed corn farm up in middle Ohio, just north of Columbus. He was one of 6 children, and he loved farming. He loved the seed corn business, but even though he grew up in Ohio, he hated the winters. So in 1948, he moved to Foley, Alabama, near Gulf Shores.
Smart birds fly south. He was a smart bird. That's right.
That's exactly right. So I was born and raised in Baldwin County. And literally grew up in the business and in the fields and processing corn. And then later in life, I won't go into the whole story. It's in the book, but the farm subsidy program really put him out of business because it was paying farmers in that part of the country more money to put their land in trees.
You don't mean that federal government intervention actually had a problem, created a problem? Gee.
Yes, it did.
Yes, it did. Yes.
And so he was leasing land to raise corn. He couldn't pay farmers enough to compete with that evolution of subsidy. So anyway, he started a small manufacturing business. So all that to say, particularly after he got into the manufacturing business, he made a hand nut gathering tool, automatic water fountain for livestock, both of which he created, a burger press, a hamburger press. He created all these just out of his own observations and experiences. And so I traveled with him as he's trying to sell them. And so I'm getting to my punchline. The punchline is I discovered after being on the road with him that nothing happens if somebody doesn't sell something. And I enjoyed working with my hands. He taught me how to do mechanical stuff. But quite frankly, I was fascinated by the whole process of sales and marketing. And that was the early days of brand management evolution with companies like P&G and Colgate, et cetera. And I fell in love with the whole idea of building brands and particularly the communications, creative side of marketing. So when I finished my marketing degree at Auburn, that's how I chose that major. I chose to pursue a master's in journalism and advertising at Northwestern. And after marrying my college sweetheart, Diane, who's now been my wife and best friend for 49 years, she and I loaded up and headed to Northwestern, and I got a graduate degree in that major as opposed to just an MBA.
I think you mentioned a specific professor there that
I did.
Really impacted you. Yeah.
So in the spirit of mentorship, Dad was an incredible example of entrepreneurism, hard work, tenacity. He just basically showed me the value of what the free enterprise system in America allows you to do. Whether you're successful at it or not, you can pursue your dreams. Then when I had this decision to make about what do I do after undergraduate school, my professor at Auburn, who also became dean, George Horton, walked in one day, no appointment. I said, Dr. Horton, I feel like I want to do something other than just go straight into sales work. I have an interest in communications, marketing communications. And he immediately said, I'd recommend 3 graduate programs. One of them was Northwestern. That was the one I preferred. And he was so kind to get on the phone and arrange an interview for me with the dean there, Vernon Freiberger, who told him, well, the class is already closed. But George Horton convinced Dr. Freiberger to give me an interview, and I went up along with Diane, and my parents came along as escorts, and I got in. 2 weeks later, I found out I got in. So George was a great mentor in school, but my gosh, his assistance to get me into graduate school was huge. I was at TI for a year. I had a really good manager there. They were breaking into semiconductor consumer products, but they were an engineering company, and it frustrated me. And I got a call one day from Dan Howells, who was the director of marketing at Six Flags over Texas. He said, I got an opening out here. The short of it is I went out and interviewed with him. If you know anything about Six Flags, particularly back in the 70s, they were one of the leading, right up there with Disney, they were one of the leading marketing companies in the entertainment industry. Marketing culture, brand culture. Spent an entire day interviewing and got the job. And so the short of that story is I worked for Six Flags for 8 years, starting in Texas, most of it in Atlanta, where I became the director of marketing at Six Flags over Georgia. I succeeded one of those mentors, Spurgeon Richardson, who became the general manager of that park. Spurge was just a tremendous influence on me in terms of always thinking outside the box, thinking about how to partner with sponsors. As he used to say, how do we use other people's money? Because we never had enough of our own. But his love for building a guest experience and brand permeated the business. I think he was ahead of his time.
I do too. And and when he ran the Convention and Visitors Bureau, I thought he was well ahead of his time.
That's exactly right.
I mean, he was one of the great guys. We may have even intersected a little bit. I worked for Bob Cohn for 2 years at Cohn & Wolf, and we had both the Six Flags and the Chick-fil-A accounts at the time, and I got to work with Clisby Clark, at McCann, who I thought was one of the great underrated admin in the country.
Clisby was instrumental in helping us develop. Probably, I'm biased, but I think probably the greatest brand-oriented advertising campaign Six Flags ever had. The theme was "Hug Your Kids the Six Flags Way," and we produced it. He did the creative, he did the music. You knew him; he could sit down at the piano and create. And it was such a popular campaign. The year we introduced it in Georgia, it spread to the other parks the next year. So I learned a lot from that experience about creating advertising that wasn't designed just to drive transactions, but was actually designed to create an emotional connection with your audience. Bob Cohn, you mentioned him. He was the first agent who we hired. He had the Six Flags accounts, but I hired him at Chick-fil-A, and we were his first full-time retainer account. And he always says that we helped get them, really off the launching pad, because we brought them that guaranteed monthly cash flow. But they did an awesome job for us at Six Flags and at Chick-fil-A.
I got an email from Bob last week, Steve, where he was telling everybody that after 54 years in Atlanta, they were moving back to Tuscaloosa. And I thought, it's good for you. I mean, he's got family over there, and
he got his degree there. He edited a newspaper there. He worked in Montgomery as an editor. Absolutely, he loves. Even though I'm from Auburn, he loves the Crimson Tide. I understand.
But
Bob was another one of those mentors that taught me how to use PR for something other than just press releases. How to use media relations to create events and stories that had brand value and created interest around a brand other than just, some piece of factual news. And so they were a major influence on our early days of creating events at stores. And obviously events became a major tool in our marketing kit at Chick-fil-A over time, but he was a catalyst in us having those experiences early. So then when I get into the Chick-fil-A environment, and I would say back to Six Flags for a minute, there were a couple other guys, Byron Carruthers at Six Flags over Texas, Jim Pemberton, who was the VP of sales for Six Flags over Texas. These guys were great mentors to me as a young executive at Chick-fil-A. And then George Delanoy, who was the senior VP of marketing for all the parks, really helped me think through the discipline of how do you create strategic marketing plans. And,
we have a lot of young people that listen to our podcast. You know, it's aimed at the sponsorship industry, and we've done a really good job of penetrating the university systems to let students know, hey, this is a free resource. We're bringing on people that can help you. And I always like to talk about lessons from each thing. And two things from this discussion so far have came out in your book were, number one is the ability to be attentive to those around you. I mean, you looked at these people and said, man, I can learn something here.
Yep.
And secondly, the thankfulness of the people that helped you along the way came through loud and clear in the book that I think is, a lot of people, a lot of people think they do it by themselves. No, they don't.
No.
Yeah.
Well, Rick, even after I got to Six Flags over Georgia, I still made regular trips back to Dallas to spend time with Byron and Jim Pemberton, because those guys were a wealth of experience. So I had great mentors within the Six Flags organization. They were very, very gracious to me. They gave me a chance to be a marketing director at the age of 28. That was a risk. I probably thought I knew it all, but fortunately I had enough mentors around me to help me figure out what mistakes I didn't need to remake. And they were great help. And then, of course, Spurge was a friend and a mentor even after I left. He was very gracious when I made the decision to go to Chick-fil-A. So I had a relationship with Chick-fil-A prior to working with them. The COO, Jimmy Collins, he wasn't a mentor yet, but you're talking about being observant. He was observant. I had approached them about building a restaurant in the park back in 79 or 80. That deal did not work out. He wanted to make money at it. And our position was, you're going to build the brand, you're going to create trial, but Six Flags is going to make money. So that didn't work for him. So that dropped through the crack. But it was in late 1980 that he's the one that reached out to me and said, look, we've been looking for a marketing director. We don't have a marketing department, and your name keeps coming up. Would you have an interest in talking? And Rick, when he said we don't have a marketing department, I in the back of my mind, I thought, well, I already knew that, or you would have done that deal with me. but that I was curious because I'd worked now for principally three corporations. And I looked at Texas Instruments in Texas and Six Flags over Georgia as three corporations, three corporate environments. And here was one that was different. And the key part that was different, those three were all part of corporately owned entities, particularly within Six Flags, very, very marketing oriented, but also very transactional oriented. You don't drive attendance, you don't have a job. Very cash flow, quarterly earnings, focused both there and TI. And I walk into the Six Flags process and start interviewing. And by the way, it wasn't going to be, I thought it was going to be maybe 2 or 3 days. It turned out to be over almost 5 months. But I walk into that environment of interviewing, and I discover real quick, Truett Cathy was not focused on transactions. He was focused on building relationships, first and foremost with the operators running his restaurant, secondly with the staff he recruited, and then thirdly and most importantly, the customers. And he had figured out if he did a good job of picking the right partners, relationships as operators and his staff, he would attract and keep customers, because he'd learned that lesson running the Dwarf House on the south side of Atlanta for over 27 years before he even created the Chick-fil-A sandwich. And he was a relationship-oriented guy. I unpacked the long story in the book, but in my last interview with him, I asked him, what are you looking for in the ideal marketing candidate? And he said, I have no idea. All I know is whatever it is, I don't want to do it. Now, I've been interviewing almost 5 months, and I'm doing it.
And the boss says he doesn't want to do it.
I'm doing it still. But that was only the first part of his answer. He said, the real thing I'm interested in, Steve, is who you are. I want to know that you and I can have fun together, and I can trust you. Because if we invite you to come here, it's my expectation you're not going to go anywhere else. Now, I've had 4 different jobs in 8 years, and that's a bit of a paradigm shift right there.
Yeah. And
then he said something, Rick, that really, it was unusual at the time, but it was absolutely true of that culture. We don't hire culture. We don't train culture. We hire it. Really, the better word is we don't recruit culture. We don't train culture. We recruit it. And get my words right here. They recruit. They don't hire.
Yeah.
And they recruit through a cultural litmus that puts heavy focus on 3 big things. Competency. Yeah, they got to be able to do the job. And true as said, I'm trusting Jimmy and others to figure out if you can do the job. But they also pay a lot of attention to character and then chemistry. How is this person going to deal with other people? Can they develop natural fellowship? Are they a team player? And then to Truett's other point around character, can I trust them? Is there integrity there? Because he knew that if he could trust people, if they were competent, if he could trust them, and if they developed leadership ability, and not only in themselves but others, then he could empower them. And at the back end of that 35 years at Chick-fil-A, I can tell you that Truett never called me to his office one time to say, why'd you do that, or you screwed up. Now, I did. I made some mistakes. But he never did anything that suggested he didn't trust me in that job. And anytime I took a proposal to him that was significant to the direction or the investment of the business, he knew I'd already done the homework. And his question was always the same, Rick. He says, is this going to help the business? Do you think this is going to help the business? And when he said that, what he really meant is this going to help the reputation of the brand. He wasn't talking about short-term sales.
Yeah.
He said, is this going to help the business, the health of the business? I said, Truett, I wouldn't recommend it if it wasn't. And his answer was always the same. He said, okay. So whether it was a few $1,000s or literally tens and tens of millions in the latter part of my career, his response was always the same. I trust you and your team. If it's good for the business, you have my support.
It's interesting. It's interesting, Steve, about mistakes. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me just make one comment about it. So how do you think I behaved with my team?
Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah.
Same way.
Yeah. Yeah. And, do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
That's exactly right.
In that case, you said, boy, my boss trusts me. My boss allows me to make mistakes. Probably doesn't want you to make the same one twice, but
nope.
And I've always said, if you're not making any mistakes, you're probably not trying. You're playing it too safely. But then you are able to take that learning all the way down to your team.
That's right.
And then you tell the David Sawyers of the world and the other guys, hey, I trust you.
That's exactly right.
And that's a wonderful culture.
Well, it even starts before that. It starts with the way I recruit and the way I select talent. I learned to do it the way he did it. Be very proactive with looking for talent. Always have your eye open for talent. Be diligent in the process. Do your homework. But then when you feel like you've got the right person, coach them on the culture, coach them on strategy, work with them on strategy, but then let them go.
Well, yeah, you're kind of saying you built, and the company built the culture. I call it one brick at a time. It was really one human being at a time.
One person. That's what Truett meant. We don't train culture. We hire it or we select it. The people you attract to the business either help the culture or damage it. And you got to clarify, you got to codify the culture in words. And trust me, we did that. And I unpacked that a lot in the book. We got the culture codified in words, because the bigger you get, you got to be very clear about what your purpose is, what your core values are, and why, what the expectation is of what we're trying to do in the marketplace. You do those things well, then people know what the box top is on how to form strategy and how to do their work. But yes, absolutely. Culture is shaped by who you invite into the business. The very thing Truett said to me in that last interview. And I will tell you that he and Jimmy Collins, who was the COO until 2001, they focused principally on managing the culture. They left strategic formation and execution to those that they had hired, got guys and gals like me. So they intentionally role modeled the way they wanted us to lead. And I think that's one of the reasons Chick-fil-A has continued to prosper so well. They're into the second and the third generation of leaders, both within the Cathy family and with non-family members. And you got people in there that have not just grown up in the culture, but have seen it formulated, heard it preached, and seen it lived out by leaders. And culture is contagious. That's both good or bad.
Yeah.
And fortunately, so far, I think they are managing the culture in a way that is contagious in a very positive, high momentum way. I mean, their guest experiences continue to be great. Their sales volumes are off the chart. They're not messing with the core foundational tenets of the business, right down to the operator model, and the customer continues to reward them. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. A lot of businesses historically have failed at the third generation.
That's right.
I mean, I've seen that just repeatedly in that. And one of the wonderful stories that Bill Battle, my good friend Bill Battle, told me, he said we had one of Truett's grandkids as an intern at CLC. And he came to me one day and said, Coach Battle, if it's okay, I need to miss on Monday. And he said, sure, that'll be fine. What are you doing? He said, well, my granddaddy's taking all of the grandchildren to the White House for the National Day of Prayer. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you were talking about culture, and you were talking about culture from the top down.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that story. I mean,
well, Truett could have, the real point of you telling that story, Truett could have gone alone.
Yeah.
But he took second and third generation family. I think he even took one or two staff members. I know he took one of my direct reports, Don Perry, who was VP of Public Relations.
Yep.
But you're absolutely right. That's a good illustration.
Yeah, it's a great illustration. The other thing, Steve, I found in your book, and I think talking to you today, I understand, is when you looked for outside resources, you looked for the same characteristics as you did in internal. I mean, I'm a big Stan Richards fan. I was in Dallas for a number of years. The culture of the Richards Group was unique in the advertising industry, and they became a great partner of yours.
Yes,
Talk a little bit about that.
Well, it wasn't until the late 1990s that we even needed an ad agency, because we were, as you well remember, we were principally based in malls for years. And even after we went out on the street in the mid 80s. It wasn't until the mid 90s we had enough stores that warranted traditional advertising even being considered. We were street level marketers. But we had, by the 96, I think, we had over 500 stores, principally in the Southeast. We were toying with the idea of sponsoring the Peach Bowl, becoming the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, our first foray into any sort of regional brand presence. And we knew that if we got involved with the bowl, we were going to need great advertising because we were certainly going to be on the air. But we also had enough stores in about 20 markets that warranted some form of what I call brand air cover advertising. And so we did an agency search. David Sayers and his team led that search. We got it down to 3 shops, and the Richards Group was the one we picked. And to your point, we picked them principally on 2 issues. One, they had an incredible track record of innovative, out-of-the-box creative. And we knew that if our advertising looked and smelled and sounded like traditional fast food advertising, we would be totally lost. Secondly, their culture was all about attracting great talent and keeping it, which is a complete oxymoron for what most ad agencies do. Stan had this passion for creative product, and he was willing to attract great people, keep them, give them great assignments. And so we selected them. And the cherry on top was when Stan told us in the last meeting we had with him, if you pick us, you're not going to see any creative that I've not personally seen and approved.
Well, the difference again, Chick-fil-A, privately held company, Richards Group, privately held company, not part of a holding company, not looking at the second quarter numbers.
That's right. So he took a long-term view at brand development. We were taking a long-term view of brand development. We weren't looking for quick fixes through advertising. And of course, it led to our experimentation with 3D billboards. We were into that for about 9 months when they came back with the Eat More Chicken idea from the cows. We ran that in our top 20 markets. It was a huge hit. We went back to him and said, Stan, we think you got something here that's bigger than a billboard idea. Can you work on it for 2 or 3 months and see if we can't develop a campaign around the whole idea of Eat More Chicken? And the rest was history. They did it. They showed us stuff, and 3 months later that was off the charts. And when I left, we've been using them, and we've been developing the cow creative for 22 years.
Yeah, I always said when you know you have a hit when consumers look forward to the next execution. Yeah. Can't wait to see what the cows are going to do next.
Yes.
That's pretty special.
They became iconic. We had 2 icons in business when I left, Truett and the cows, and they put us on the map. Now, college football was a great platform for that creative, but we were already out there using billboards and other vehicles for the cows to spin their message. And I give Stan and his team all the credit. They came out with it. They were innovative. They kept it fresh. They made it relevant to a cross section of audiences, and they never tried to force any creative down our throat that we didn't like. And quite frankly, for me, my litmus test for their creative was pretty simple, Rick. If I didn't laugh, I didn't like it.
Yeah, that's good.
If it didn't make me laugh, then it wasn't on strategy.
Sometimes don't you think, Steve, marketers, we overthink things?
Oh my God.
At some point, if we don't like it, nobody else is going to like it.
If it was on strategy, that's great. But if it didn't make me and the others laugh, we didn't do it. And then, of course, the customers are always the final litmus test because they love the campaign, they wear the creative, they show up on Cow Appreciation Day by the millions, and buy millions of cow calendars, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a great ride. Sure was.
Well, listen, we got a lot to talk about. I'm going to need to bring you back for next week too, if you don't mind. And and I want to come back in next week's show. Start with college football, with the way that you uniquely use college football, and I also want to talk about this kind of this giving back culture of Chick-fil-A, this community service of giving back. So we'll do that next time. And but for today, I thank you for being with us from the bridge.
It was my honor. I look forward to next week.
Thanks, pal. We've talked about food and more food on today's show. But let's close anyway with another place to eat on the road with Rick. When I was a kid growing up in Atlanta, there actually was a restaurant besides Chick-fil-A that served Chick-fil-A. That's right. For a few years, Truett Cathy actually licensed the product to a small group of restaurants. One such lucky place was the Old Hickory House. At one time, there were several of these restaurants throughout Metro Atlanta. In fact, our CEO and my business partner, Rob Temple's dad, actually worked for the Old Hickory House at one time. Well, there is still one left standing in Tucker, Georgia. Tucker is a suburb of Atlanta in DeKalb County. It was started in 1955, which was the year after I was born. They still serve the same great food. Barbecue, of course, it is the Old Hickory House. But they also serve maybe the best Brunswick stew I've ever had. Now, for my Yankee friends, you may not know what Brunswick stew is, and there's a debate about whether it came from Brunswick, Georgia, or Brunswick County, Virginia. But nevertheless, Brunswick stew is a stew made of chicken and pork and vegetables and barbecue sauce that is unbelievably good, and the best that I've ever had is at this Old Hickory House. They also have great squash casserole and other vegetables, plus fruit cobblers and wonderful banana pudding. They also serve a terrific Southern breakfast with eggs, grits, sausage, and biscuits. Yes, it's old school, just like me on the road with Rick. Well, that's it for today. I hope you liked the show. We'll be back next week and continue our discussions with Steve Robinson. We'll see you then.